I'm joined now by the Democratic leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. Senator Schumer, thank you for coming. I want to get to a lot of things that he raised as well.
First, wish you happy Greek Independence Day.
Thank you.
I wore my Greek colors.
Yassi, you're wearing
in New York.
right across the park right now. Thank you, Freddie Stahl. Let's talk about the president first. He said you're the big loser.
Well, you know, look. The bottom line is very simple, and that is, the president never called us once about this. They came on board with repeal, which they knew every Democrat would oppose, and no one believes that. But I would say this, we Democrats, provided our Republican colleagues drop, replace, and stop undermining the ACA, are willing to work with our Republican friends.
Right now, you can make a proposal?
As long as they say no more repeal, that's a loser. 17% of Americans like Trump care. That's it. They didn't want it. And stop undermining ACA. And we'll work with them. We have ideas. They have ideas to try to improve Obamacare. We never said it was perfect. We always said we'd work with them to improve it. We just said repeal was off the table. And I just make one other point on this, George. For the president to say that he'll destroy it or undermine it, that's not presidential. That's petulance. Being petulant, not a president. And it's not going to work. The job of a president is to make Americans' lives better. And if he, out of anger or vengeance or whatever, starts undermining ACA, it's going to backfire on him because he's the president and the American people know he's in charge and they want him to make things better.
Well, you just heard Congressman Meadows right there. He says the repeal effort's not dead.
Well, it won't succeed. And, you know, there's one point we're missing here. The American people hated Trump care. The more they learned about it, the more they didn't like. And, you know, not only did we have a totally unified Democratic caucus from Bernie Sanders to Joe Manchin, but I want to salute all the people out there, the average people who called and wrote and picketed and protested. If they keep on this repeal path, they'll get nowhere. And it's mainly because if they want to do with what Mr. Meadows does, then all the moderates will jump off. It's, you know, they have 7 kids in the bed and they have enough covers for 5. So they ought to get rid of repeal, drop it. It's been a flop for them because of the substance of repeal, and work with us to improve it.
One of the things that unites Republicans is tax cuts, and I think we just heard some pretty big news there from Chairman Meadows saying tax reform doesn't mean that you have to pay for all of your tax cuts.
If you analyze, George, what went wrong with ACA, the president exhibited 2 traits that are not very helpful. And if he repeats them, in tax reform, they'll get nowhere. The first is basic lack of competence. You cannot run the presidency like you run a real estate deal. You can't tweet your way through it. You can't threaten and intimidate and say, I'll walk away. It's more complicated. But even more to the point, the president campaigned as a populist against the Democratic and Republican establishments. But he's been captured by the hard right, wealthy special interests. That's who loved his proposal on the Trump care, because it gave huge tax cuts to the rich. If they do the same thing on tax reform, and the overwhelming majority of the cuts go to the very wealthy, the special interests, corporate America, and the middle class and the poor people are left out, they'll lose again.
So you're not working with the president on tax reform?
America is not where the hard right is. If he aims a proposal aimed at the middle class and the poor people, doesn't give breaks to the rich, they're doing great. God bless them. I'm glad they're doing great. They don't need another tax break. We could work with them, but I don't think they're headed in that direction, and they're going to repeat the same mistake they made on Trump care with tax reform. The hard right is great at opposition. Now they're in charge. America's not where the hard right is.
I was struck by something that former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich said. He said that the president should put off tax reform and work right away, particularly with Democrats, on a major infrastructure bill. Would you be open to that?
Again, it's a question of values. Infrastructure is something we Democrats have put in a proposal. It has the support of our entire caucus. $1 trillion of infrastructure, which creates about 15 million new good-paying jobs. So we like it. But here's where the president seems to be headed again. Special interest, wealthy special interest. Let's do it by tax breaks. The tax breaks he's proposing, 82 cents on the dollar, goes to the financiers. That's one problem. So you're not getting bang for the buck. 2, in the places where those tax breaks will work, you're getting huge tolls. The American people don't want tolls on every highway. And 3rd, it will build nothing in rural America and large parts of exurban America because it just can't pay those tolls. So if they want to actually spend some money, Meadows would be vehemently opposed, and he'd have to break with the hard right in his caucus. We'll talk to him for sure.
But, you know, so when you look at this, I mean, the president has this issue now with Republicans. They're going to try to get together on tax reform and other issues. A lot of people look at this and say, you know, the president hadn't been a Republican for all that long. He had voted for Democrats in the past, and the way to govern on these big issues would be to take a completely different path and, you know, go in a different direction and work with Democrats. Now, it doesn't sound like you're ready to be a real partner there.
No, it's not me. It's him. He ran as a populist against the Democratic and Republican establishments. He ran as a defender of the middle class. The minute he got into office, maybe led by Vice President Pence and some of the others, he moved so far the hard right that it's virtually impossible for us to work with him. If he changes, he could have a different presidency, but he's going to have to tell the Freedom Caucus and the hard right special wealthy interests who are dominating his presidency, but he didn't campaign for them. He campaigned on the opposite. He's going to have to tell them he can't work with them. And we'll certainly look at his proposals, but it's going to be guided by our values. On the one hand, we're not going to oppose things because the name Trump is on it, but we're not going to compromise our values away and help the well-to-do and hurt the middle class and the poorer people. That's what he's been doing so far.
Government runs out of money, I believe, on April 28th. You can filibuster a government funding proposal. Are you prepared to shut down the government?
No, we don't want to shut down the government, and we've proposed to Leader McConnell the same thing that worked last year and the year before. Just three simple things. One, no sequester levels of funding. I think they've agreed to that already, both he and Speaker Ryan. Two, parity between defense and non-defense.
The president wants a defense increase.
And slashes the programs that help the middle class the most. We want parity. It worked last year. And three, no poison pill riders like Planned Parenthood. Now, that worked last year, and we got a budget. If President Trump would stay out of it, because his budget, done by Mulvaney, is so far to the right, slashing middle-class things like education, like transportation, like medical research, like clean air and clean water, no, we can't work. But left alone, McConnell, Ryan, and the Democrats could come to an agreement.
So the president's defense increases have to be off the table?
No, they don't have to be off the table, but you can't slash domestic programs.
What about funding for the border wall?
The border wall should be talked about, shouldn't be rammed down people's throats for a whole bunch of reasons. First, it's not the best way to protect the border. Everyone agrees on that. Second, it's very expensive. Why don't we use that money for roads? Third, let's give the president a little chance to get Mexico to pay it. Isn't that what he told everybody, that we weren't going to pay it? And fourth, it's got a big problem that Republicans on the border states are opposing, Texas, Arizona, because there's eminent domain and you have to take the private land. So instead of trying to jam it through on this short-term budget and say, take it or leave it, we should debate it in 2018's budget over the summer. And by the way, my prediction, it wouldn't get the votes on either the Democratic or Republican side.
Judge Neil Gorsuch, the Republicans have made it clear that he's going to get through no matter what you do, even though you follow through on the filibuster. It's also clear that he's eminently qualified. Even your own Senator Joe Manchin has said he should get an up or down vote. Why not?
Well, 60 votes should be the standard. Why? Because for something as important as the Supreme Court, George, 60 votes make sense. You get bipartisan support. You avoid judges far right or far left. And each of the four last judges, two by President Bush, Alito and Roberts, two by President Obama, Kagan and Sotomayor, met that 60-vote standard. The bottom line is, when we Democrats had a chance to change the rules, we didn't change it for Supreme Court for that very reason. And I'd say to my Republican friends and to the country, if you don't think the candidate can, if the candidate can't get 60 votes, if the nominee can't get 60 votes, you don't change the rules. You change the candidate. And one final point. Mitch McConnell it's in his hands whether to change the rules, not ours. And he doesn't come to this court with clean hands because he delayed Merrick Garland for a year and a half. If they want to change the rules, it would be bad for the country, bad for the Congress. We didn't do it. It'll be in their laps. There are one more point. A lot of Republicans don't want to change the rules. I'm not so sure it's a
But you also said this week that it would be unseemly to approve Judge Gorsuch as long as this FBI investigation is going on into the Russian interference in our election. That could take years.
Yeah, but we didn't say years. What we said is for a few months. Let's see where look, this is a very important appointment. Lifetime, affects America in huge ways. Judge Roberts came on the court, now Justice Roberts. Citizens United dramatically changed America. Taking away voting rights changed America. Trying to get rid of unions. So let's see where this investigation goes for a few months and delay it. It's up to our Republican colleagues. I hope they'll accept that argument. If the investigation looks like it's nowhere, fine. If it looks like it's really serious, yeah, we ought to consider, well, what I said.
Senator Schumer, thanks for coming in this morning.
Nice to be here, George.